The Christmas Letters, celebrating Advent with those who told the story first. Written by Magrey R. DeVega. Each year, most of us share in the ritual of sending and receiving Christmas cards. These cards typically contain more than just the commensurate Merry Christmas greeting and a signature from the sender. Often, they contain photos of the family, highlights of their past year, and words of greeting to family and friends. Sometimes, they even include letters, folded and tucked into the envelope. Even though the sending of Christmas cards has been around since the mid-19th century, I'm not sure how or when the tradition of including personal letters began. No other time of year offers such an occasion, not Easter or New Year's Day or Thanksgiving. Somehow, we have taken to Christmas to be the time of reflecting, catching up, and looking ahead. Thinking about the Christmas letters you have received in the past, you scan the photos to see the places your friends have visited. You read the milestone moments they have observed together. You think about your own interactions with them over the past year. You ponder when you might see them again in person. These letters are more than news updates or points of reconnection with your family and friends. They are an invitation for their story to intersect with your own, and for your remembrance of them to come alive even for a brief moment of time. You remember what these people have meant to you over the years. You celebrate that. Even though you may be separated by distance, you are still connected to one another in kinship and love. Christmas is the perfect time to reawaken relationships, remember past connections, and ponder the wonder of love that holds us all together. Now, imagine that. Tucked among the piles of Christmas letters from family and friends, there waits for you a stack of correspondence from the greatest sender of all. The God who created you, loves you, and draws near to you in Jesus. Wouldn't those be letters worth cherishing? This study centers on a special set of letters that were delivered thousands of years ago to the earliest Christian communities in the first century Greco-Roman world. They were not Christmas letters, but they were letters about Jesus. They were not specifically about his birth, but they give us the earliest glimpses about what the church believed about the incarnation, the miracle that God became human. Some of these letters were written just decades after Jesus was on earth, even while the gospel accounts were still circulating in oral form before they were written down. All of them represent faithful attempts by the early church to understand who Jesus was and what his life meant for humankind. To read them now, in the light of Advent and Christmas, is to read them as a kind of Christmas letter to the modern-day church, catching us up on how our spiritual ancestors were opening up to the wonder and power of Jesus Christ. This study will focus on 4 epistles in particular, and we will discover what they reveal to us about what the first Christians believed about the Incarnation. We will see their points of connection to more familiar Advent scriptures, lectionary text from the prophets, and the birth narratives in the Gospels. In chapter 1, we'll look at Romans, particularly the first chapter, and see how Paul's view of Jesus is rooted in the words of the ancient prophets, just as many of the Gospel's birth narratives are rooted in Isaiah. We'll see how Advent prompts us to look back at our own spiritual journey, which will guide us in looking forward to the life God intends for us. In chapter 2, we'll look at the first epistle of John, which is connected theologically and literally with the Gospel of John. We'll see how the famous text from John 1, so often read at Christmas, resonates with 1 John, and how they both point to the creation arc in Genesis 1. Taken together, they will remind us of how God's love has been revealed throughout salvation history and is revealed to us in Jesus. In chapter 3, we'll look at Paul's letter to the Philippians, including the ancient Christian hymn in the 2nd chapter. We'll explore how that magnificent scripture gives us a glimpse into the church's earliest views of the incarnation. Jesus became fully human, fully obedient, and he models for us how to have a mindset of servanthood. We'll connect that to the story of Mary, a standard feature of the 3rd week of Advent, and see how her life exemplifies joyful obedience in service to God. In chapter 4, we'll conclude our journey with Paul's letter to the Colossians, which reminds us in the 1st chapter of Jesus' full divinity, existing since the days of creation. When we see Jesus, we see the fullness of God revealed to us. And remember how Jesus is greater than all earthly powers. We'll connect that notion of Christ's full divinity with Matthew's birth narrative, in which Herod saw Jesus as a divine threat to his throne, and the Greco-Roman belief in other gods. Most of all, we will be invited to experience the awe and wonder of the incarnation every day. So, consider these texts as a special set of Christmas letters, written by our spiritual ancestors and inspired by the God who became flesh for us in Jesus. As we read them, we will see our stories intersect with theirs. Though we are separated by time and distance from the earliest Christians, we will celebrate our kinship as fellow believers and discover how they began to formulate the very beliefs in Jesus that we have inherited over the generations. Most of all, we will rediscover how to make Christmas more than just an annual observance, but a way of life modeled after Jesus all year round. Blessings on the journey.